Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new NVIDIA daily update video. So today, let's talk about NVIDIA stock. Let's talk about what is happening with the stock, what we can expect moving forward, and all of that good stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed, please don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice, and I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, etc., well, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day the market is open, as the market is actually trading for just $3 a month. Again, it does mainly include Tesla stocks, sometimes other stocks, like I talked about AMD today as well for my members. If you're interested, again, that's all down below. I'll give an update on AMD. I think AMD has potential. It has potential here, but nonetheless, that update is there. Again, it's just $3 a month. Or if you're interested, for $5 a month instead, you get access to everything in the first year, plus of course, NVIDIA updates as well. Again, it is a YouTube membership. Link is below in each and every single video at the top of the description, or you can press that join button on the channel. But nonetheless, jumping into it, NVIDIA closing the day down 4.5%, closing almost at $97 per share, which compared to the market, pretty painful day in the markets once again. But NVIDIA, you can argue, is doing okay relative to the market. You know, it's okay. It's not amazing. It's not great. It's okay, right? But nonetheless, what does this actually mean moving forward? Well, we talked about on the weekly to start that, the weekly closure was just not very convincing, right? Again, we're constantly getting rejected by these levels here. I don't like that. Granted, the weekly is very far away from the mean reversion, so at some point I think we should ultimately revert. However, nonetheless, the point is the fact that the stock, it's continuing to close below this trend line, which is not something I'm a huge fan of. But I also mentioned that if it gets very deep, closer to the bottom end of this range, well, that's where it starts getting a bit interesting. So let's see how this actually plays out. But this is where I want to start zooming in once again. Let's go to the 1 hours first, and I'll go to the 15 actually. The 15 was pretty interesting. I was updating my members on the 15 throughout most of the day. So what do we do on the 1 hour time frame? Well, I mentioned also on our Thursdays, well, technically Sunday's video actually, but I mentioned how, we have that Fibonacci, right? And we are dancing, you can see, right around that 6.8 Fibonacci level, which is around 97.5. We're at obviously 97, so it's pretty close. So that's gonna be the first level to look for. Obviously, this level doesn't serve as a meaningful bounce spot, which I actually think it might, because I'll explain why soon. The next level to the downside will be about 93 to about 91.5, we'll say, something like that, which is that green Fibonacci down here. So those are the main two levels I'm looking for. And, you can argue NVIDIA, assuming you maintain a bullish perspective, since we broke that higher high over here, this is the discount spot. This right here, this whole range right here, this 97 to like $92. Yeah, it is a discount spot. You can argue that absolutely, right? So let's see how that plays out moving forward, but not looking too bad. MACD on the 1 hour is starting to look potentially bullish, ready to flip bullish, I should say. 1 hour on the RSI is still looking mediocre. It is kind of in, it went into oversold territory slightly, which is where I, usually start eyeballing opportunities. But I prefer to seeing bullish divergence. It's kind of like what we saw right over here with this nice bullish divergence, right? That's what I like to see. We're not seeing that yet, but we absolutely could, especially if we make our way down eventually to this 92-ish range, then we most likely will. Something like this, for instance. Nonetheless, so the point is the fact that it is technically, in assuming you have a bullish perspective, it is in a attractive range, honestly, down here, right? It is in a bit of an attractive range for sure. But let's go to the 15. Nothing else on the 1 hour thing. I mean, we're not too far away from the market bias or the mean reversion, so it's not, it's not crazy oversold just yet. But if I see any gap down, if I see like a large gap down, let's say, I don't know, for whatever reason tomorrow, as an example, to like 93, 92, I'm a big buyer there. I'm a very, very big buyer there. Let's see. So let's go to the 15. So what happened today, right? And what is going on? This is what I was talking to my members about for some time, right? Throughout the mornings, the afternoons, etc. Massive sell-off, ended up making a little bit of a bear flag that looked something like this, and then we sold off to the downside. And this is what I was telling my members. After we ended up breaking about 95.5, I mentioned how, that becomes weakness, that shows weakness. However, you always have to look at both sides, because if NVIDIA can essentially reclaim 95.5 to 96, that actually is pretty bullish. And that's what I was mentioning to my members, right? Because you can see, as I zoom in over here, right, you can take a look at it yourself. You can see about, the first third of the day or so, you can see this area over here, support. It just, it kept coming down there and it kept holding and it kept bouncing, right? But then at the same time, resistance right here. So those are the two levels to watch for, essentially, right? It obviously broke on this candle, and then it kind of, had a little bit more pain. But then more importantly, you can see this area now turned into a resistance. The same area back here turned into a resistance. And I mentioned, if we can reclaim this area, this could be a very large liquidity sweep and false breakdown potentially. And that's exactly what happened. This candle right here, we reclaimed it. I even shared it with my members right around here, right? You can see NVIDIA closed a 15-minute candle back above 95.5 to 96, which is promising, right? And then we, of course, had that nice follow through with pretty decent volume. So what is the next step now for NVIDIA? As this, this breakout actually happened. And I actually mentioned this earlier in the day as well. I don't know if I can find the post. It was somewhere below. I don't know where it was. I think it was this one maybe. Yeah, this one I think it was. This means my next target down to 93 is now in play. However, if bulls can manage to close back above 95.5 to 96, then I will view this as a false breakdown liquidity grab, and then the reversal can be sharp. And look at that reversal. Very nice reversal so far in the 15-minute time frame, right? And that's kind of what you want to look for in these kind of situations. So now the question is, what's next? Well, what I view as next for NVIDIA, especially considering NVIDIA, very quickly looking at the options flow, towards the end of the day, right? Like a minute before the market closed, someone bought $330,000 of NVIDIA 105 calls expiring this week. Pretty bullish actually. So what does that actually mean moving forward? Going back to the 1 hour time frame, it's honestly one of my favorite time frames by far. It really wouldn't shock me if NVIDIA makes its way back up closer to 106. Closer to $100 per share. Why $100 per share? Because that's where the market bias is currently sitting at the quote unquote mean reversion. Again, when stocks are, doing their thing, they more often than not revert back to the mean at some point or another, usually sooner than later. Not always, of course, it's not perfect, but even when we were rising up here, you can see reversion, right? Same idea here. And then, potential reversion back to about $100 per share, which is a very crucial level, because that level can reject NVIDIA and make it go lower a little bit more, which then can potentially create a bullish divergence on the RSI on the 1 hour time frame, which is what I like to usually look for. So we'll see if we get that or not, but that could be pretty interesting. And then from here, we get a nice little rally, but this 100 level will be pretty important, assuming we get that rally into it maybe tomorrow or Wednesday or something of the sorts, because that's where we have the market bias on the 1 hour time frame. 100 is a psychological level, and of course you can see this level has acted as a support and resistance many times in the past. Resistance here, support here, even resistance this morning, which is where I sold my position for a small loss. I mentioned that I took on Thursday, right? I just sold it for a small loss, like I mentioned, because we had that small little morning pump. You usually get those small morning pumps in the first 5 to 10 minutes before you get a continuation to the downside on the massive gap down. I used that opportunity to de-risk it, which obviously was the right call, and so far it's looking pretty decent. So that's going to be the main thing I'll be looking for moving into, even as early as tomorrow, probably maybe even by Wednesday. Honestly, a move back to 100, that'll be the first level I'll look for. If it bulls can reclaim 100 and meaningfully turn it back into support, then this can start looking a lot more interesting on the 1 hour time frame. A little more zoomed in here, we can maybe start getting a larger bullish head and shoulders that can look something like this. Maybe we can get something like that. You know what I mean? That becomes a possibility. So again, we'll have to look at it, we'll have to see how it unfolds and whatnot. But in terms of just straight levels, zones, supports, resistance, just the very classic stuff. 100 is the first level, 106 is the next level, and then if we somehow get higher than that, the next level will be closer to 112 to 114, which is the level. If NVIDIA at some point, in my opinion at least, can break above 112-ish, 111 to 114, honestly that $3 range, which is this whole region all the way up here, right? If we can break above that, I think NVIDIA will actually be looking pretty damn good, to be completely honest with you. It'll get back above these levels, right? It'll break out of a massive resistance zone, and it'll get very damn close to breaking out of this actual kind of wedge, if you will, here on the weekly. So that will open up a lot of opportunity for the stock if it can at some point break above 111 to 114. We're not there just yet, of course, but that is something to note. But for now, for the short term, 100 followed by 106 are the main two resistance levels. Below us, of course, we have still this kind of 96-ish region should still be as a potential demand spot with the Fibonacci's I mentioned earlier. But if things kind of hit the fan and we end up, unfortunately selling off even further to the downside for whatever reason, the next level I'll be looking for below us here will be closer to about 92 to we'll just say $92-ish per share, 93 to 91. To make it simple, 93 to 91 will be that next massive area of kind of demand and support that I'll be looking for, which is, of course, this beautiful Fibonacci support all the way down here, which that should be a very nice opportunity, right? Especially if you consider it from the daily perspective, that will be closer to the bottom end of this situation over here where we find ourselves, including, of course, also on the weekly. So yeah, that's going to be how I'll be looking at it moving forward. Again, with a nice little highly unusual call option that came in for $330,000. It wouldn't fully shock me if we get a potential rally, maybe even as early as tomorrow. Again, $200 per share. Best case scenario, in my opinion, is 106, but one step at a time, especially in a market like this. So $100 per share becomes pretty likely, or at least at the very least a possibility, a very realistic possibility that I'll be looking for. And any weakness we see in the morning, as long as that weakness essentially is held by about 96 to 96.5, which was of course this area right here as a resistance. So in other words, if I go to 5 minutes, if we get a potential, red open, for instance, a small little gap down, right? I'd want to see this level hold. I want to see it kind of make its way down like this, right? Hold this area right here. That was of course a resistance, which I'll kind of, make it look like that so it's a bit easier to see. And then of course, bounce from here back up to 100. This is kind of my ideal move right now. Sell off, red open, bounce, $100 per share as early as tomorrow or Wednesday. That's going to be my like ideal perspective on NVIDIA moving forward. Let's see if we get that or not. But it's actually not looking too bad. I think it's looking pretty decent. And I think the stock does want to see $100 per share next. It's just a matter of, is it tomorrow or is it Wednesday? That's what I'll be looking for. On the flip side, it's obviously worth mentioning, if we lose 96, you probably won't be seeing 100 just yet. That does show a little bit more weakness, and that's not what the bulls want to see. They definitely want to see 96 to 96.5, hold as a support, and then bounce off of that higher to $100 per share. That's kind of my current short-term expectation. So let's see how it plays out. But yeah, that's all I got for you. Let me know what you think down below. Thank you so much for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.